Enter the catalog numbers, or can you also search, say, I want to loan all of the, birds from this county or whatever?
You can. One of the things that they've done now in Specify 6 is this thing called a record set, which is essentially like a shopping cart. So you can go through and generate a query from the query builder, or generate a query in the express search and come up with a whole bunch of stuff. So you can search for a particular county and a particular species in that county, and bring back a bunch of records, and then you can save it as a record set and say, okay, this is something that I want to use in the future. You can also add to the record set, so it's very much like a shopping cart. You can just keep adding material to it, or take material out of it, or do whatever you want to. Once you have that record set, then you can drag it and drop it around. So you can use it to generate labels. So you can grab it, and if you're in the reports tab, you can grab your record set and drag it onto your labels, and it will generate labels for all that material. Or you can simply just grab it here and drag it onto a loan, and it'll create a loan with all of that material already in it.
So is that like a dynamic saved search that's just dynamically generated?
Yeah, it's basically a saved search with all of the items within that search. You can think of it very much as a shopping cart, essentially. So
but it refreshes if there's been changes since the last one?
No, it won't dynamically refresh if there's been new changes in the database.
Okay. Is there
it's a static list of items that you have created.
Is there a way of saving search parameters? So
and we'll get to that in a second with the query builder. You can save searches and rerun them to see if there's any new material in the database. And so you can essentially grab this record set and drop it onto the loan, and it'll create the loan based on all of that information that you've included. Now, one of the other things that they've incorporated, which is a really nifty way of especially for me as a collection manager, of drilling down all of the things that I have to do into as few steps as possible. It's called the information request. We as collection managers get these emails from people all the time saying, what do you have in your collection from this particular species, blah, 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 blah. So now what you can do is you can create a record set of that particular information that they're looking for, and then just drag and drop it onto the information request. Essentially what it does is it creates something very similar to the loan form, and it attaches all of that information to this particular information request. So all the specimens that you pulled out of the collection that correspond to what this person is looking for. Then you type in the agent name, and if that agent name has an email address, and you check this button here saying send email on save, it'll automatically send them an email with this attached as an Excel spreadsheet, and any ancillary information that you want to put in the remarks column, and all of this data in the body of the text of the email, and it'll send it off to them in one fell swoop. Obviously, scenarios down the line that these guys are thinking of is that once we have web access installed in the system, people would be able to go and search your collection over the web. They'd be able to choose items that they're interested in, send you that with a whole bunch of information that you would specify that they need to send to you. And the next time you start up Specify, you'd have this little blinking information request on the left-hand side that would let you know that somebody's wanting information. You can then go and click on that, you can accept it or reject it, and then drag and drop it onto the loan and create the loan that easily.
If you have web access, why don't you just allow users to query the data themselves and acquire that?
Well, they would be querying the data, but it's short-circuiting the system of them requesting a loan from you, rather than them having to send you an email with an Excel spreadsheet attached saying...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So you wouldn't even necessarily need to see the blinking icon.
Well, you're not going to go and let them create their own loan. You want to be able to accept or deny their request.
But if these are just information requests, if they just want to know how many, they're just curious.
No, well, that's a separate thing. I'm talking about specifically a loan request. So if they want to loan materials from you.
So these are loan requests.
Yeah, they can generate a loan request by themselves.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's probably.
So this is the query builder, where you can create these really complex queries in the system where you can go and drill down into your data and decide what it is that you want to. So up at the top here is a representation of the data model. So you click on a table, say collection objects, and it starts out a collection object, and then you can get to all the linked tables and click on individual items and add them to your query scenario. And then what you can do is you can go in and you can fill in all the criteria for each of these things to drill down into your data. So you can say, I want catalog numbers less than 10,000 in this particular family collected by this particular person with a last name of such and such in this particular country. And it'll bring back all of that information. You can specify sort criteria for any of these fields. You can move the fields up and down, because this essentially will represent what the data looks like when it comes out the other side as a grid view. These will be all of your columns. You can also add whole tables to your search. so that it'll give you a formatted string of information rather than individual elements, because obviously some of these elements that you are adding to this are going to be one-to-many relationships, so you'll end up with multiple entries for a single specimen. If you put in last name and you have multiple collectors, you're going to end up with the catalog number is going to be duplicated based on how many collectors you have. Whereas if you put in just the whole collectors table, it'll format that string into a readable string of collectors, all one after the other on a single line. And so you can save these searches, you can reuse them, you can export them, and people can put them into their own collections, etc., etc. Very, 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 very useful tool in terms of searching your database and finding the information that you want to get at. This is the statistics screen, which gives you some brief statistics about your collection. Essentially just giving you some information that the majority of us have to report to our uppity-muckety-mucks every so often. How many specimens you have, how many you've catalogued in the last 7 days or the last month or the last year, how many loans you have out, how many loans are overdue, etc., etc. All of your taxonomic tree information about how many genera and species you have in your collection, how many type specimens you have, what percentage of your collection is geo-referenced, etc., etc. Just some very brief statistics on your collection. It also has some reporting tools on the left-hand side here that you can add to as well. This is just the top 5 species in the collection. The top 7 number of specimens by country. So you can see that my collection is very US-centric. And then the number of items catalogued in the last 10 years. Very good indication of how much activity you've had in the collection in terms of the new material coming in. The one part of the system that has been severely beefed up is the security scenario. Obviously, now that we are providing this scenario of being able to put multiple collections and multiple disciplines within a single database, you need to be able to specify the security for each of those users that you are putting into the system. So now this allows you to create, a botany collection manager can be the manager of the botany collection, but can also be a guest user of all of the other collections. So they can be a guest user in the mammal or the bird collection and can go in. All they can do is they can search the database. They can't do anything else. But it's a really neat facility for them to be able to look at records in other databases and potentially use them in their own database. So your bird division is way ahead of everybody else in terms of georeferencing their records. And you have a whole bunch of herpetology specimens that were collected along with those birds at the same locality. You would be able to go in and search the bird collection and drag and drop those localities back into your collection and reuse those localities that have been georeferenced in your own collection. So essentially up at the top here would be listed all of your different collections and then all of the different levels of security that you can set: managers, limited access users, guests, and full access users. And then you would go in and you would set all of the different parameters for each of those users. You can now drill down to the point where you can give them view, add, modify, and delete privileges for every single table in the database. So you can go in and you can give somebody access to a certain portion of your database and not to the rest of it. This is particularly important for the whole registrar and conservator type scenario, where you have a single registrar that is entering all of your accession information for all of your collections. Each individual collection can go in and give them read, write, and modify and delete privileges for just the accession table. And they would be able to go in and enter all of your accession information for you, and then they wouldn't be able to see any of the rest of the database. Same thing with conservators. They would be able to go in and fiddle around with all the conservation tables within the system and not have access to any of the rest of the system. But it also has applicability for students that you have in your collection who are entering data. If you only want them to enter certain pieces of information and not enter others, you can go in and make sure that they only have access to the pieces that you want them to have access to. You can also specify access to various of the different pieces of the package. So you can give them access to the backup and restore, or the trees, or interactions part of it. So if you have students, again, who are just doing data entry, you don't want them fiddling around with loans or gifts, you just deny them access to the loans and gifts, and they won't even see this button up at the top. It will just be grayed out. So they won't even be able to use it.